The morning sun barely touched the gates of Buckingham Palace when the first whispers began to spread across social media platforms. An anonymous account with no profile picture and only 12 followers had posted something that would send shockwaves through royal circles within hours. The message was simple but explosive, claiming to possess audio recordings of private conversations within the royal family regarding Princess Catherine's health condition. Sarah Mitchell, a royal correspondent for a major British newspaper, was having her usual morning coffee when her phone began buzzing incessantly. Text messages, emails, and notifications flooded her screen simultaneously. Her editor wanted her in the office immediately. Something big was happening and she needed to be on top of it. Sarah grabbed her coat and rushed out of her small London flat, her heart racing with the anticipation that only breaking news could bring. By the time Sarah reached the newspaper office, the story had already gained significant traction online. The anonymous post claimed that Queen Consort Camilla had been recorded discussing Princess Catherine's health struggles with close confidants. The audio allegedly revealed concerns about Catherine's ability to fulfill her royal duties and contained frank discussions about the Princess of Wales' medical treatments and prognosis. No actual audio had been released yet, but the mere suggestion of such recordings existing was enough to create a media firestorm. The palace press office remained eerily silent throughout the morning. Usually any hint of scandal would be met with swift denial or carefully worded statements. This silence only fueled speculation and gave the story more credibility in the eyes of the public. Royal watchers and casual observers alike began dissecting every public appearance Catherine had made in recent months, looking for clues about her health that they might have missed. Detective James Harrison of Scotland Yard received an unusual call around midday. The Royal Protection Unit wanted assistance in investigating potential breaches of privacy within palace walls. The situation was delicate and required someone with experience handling sensitive matters involving high-profile individuals. James had worked on cases involving the royal family before, though nothing quite like this. The possibility of leaked audio recordings meant someone with access to private spaces had betrayed the trust placed in them at Kensington Palace. Princess Catherine's private secretary, Elizabeth Thornton, was in crisis management mode. Calls with legal advisors, security teams, and communications experts filled her afternoon. The princess herself remained remarkably calm, having dealt with intense media scrutiny throughout her years in the royal family. However, this situation felt different. It wasn't just invasive photography or speculative tabloid stories. If the claims were true, someone very close to the family had violated their privacy in the most intimate way possible. Meanwhile, at Clarence House, Camilla's staff were equally concerned. The Queen Consort had been working hard to build her public image since becoming Queen Consort following King Charles' coronation. Any suggestion that she had been gossiping about Catherine's health could undo years of careful reputation management. Her private secretary began the difficult task of reviewing security protocols and identifying everyone who had been present during recent private conversations. By evening, the story had crossed the Atlantic. American news outlets picked up the reports, with some adding their own speculation about rifts within the royal family. Television commentators debated the implications, while British expatriates in New York and Los Angeles discussed the scandal in coffee shops and online forums. The global fascination with the British royal family meant that this story would not fade quietly into the background. Back in London, Sarah Mitchell was pulling together everything she could verify for her newspaper's evening edition. The challenge was separating fact from fiction when so much remained unconfirmed. She reached out to her contacts within royal circles, but everyone was being unusually tight. Those who would normally provide background information off the record were refusing to comment. The wall of silence suggested that palace officials were taking the threat very seriously indeed. In a small office in Scotland Yard, Detective Inspector Harrison began his preliminary investigation. His first task was to determine whether any crime had actually been committed. Recording private conversations without consent was illegal in the United Kingdom, but proving such recordings existed and identifying who made them would be challenging. He requested a list of everyone who had security clearance to enter the private areas of both Clarence House and Kensington Palace over the past 6 months. As darkness fell over London, The original anonymous post had been shared thousands of times across various social media platforms. Conspiracy theories began emerging about who might have leaked the audio and what their motivations could be. Some suggested disgruntled former palace staff, while others speculated about foreign intelligence services attempting to destabilize the monarchy. The truth, as Detective Harrison knew from experience, was likely far less dramatic, but no less damaging to those involved. Princess Catherine's medical team at the private London hospital, where she received treatment, were also contacted by palace officials. They needed to ensure that no information had been leaked from the medical side. Patient confidentiality was paramount, and any breach would have serious legal consequences. The hospital administration launched its own internal investigation, reviewing access logs and interviewing staff members who had been involved in Catherine's care. Queen Consort Camilla spent the evening with King Charles discussing how to handle the situation. Charles was reportedly furious that his wife and daughter-in-law were being dragged through such an ordeal. He authorized his private secretary to take whatever steps necessary to identify the source of the leak and ensure those responsible faced appropriate consequences. The king understood that the monarchy's reputation depended on maintaining dignity and privacy in the face of such challenges. As midnight approached, still no actual audio had surfaced. Some began to wonder if the entire thing was an elaborate hoax designed to create chaos and sell newspapers. Others remained convinced that the recordings existed and would eventually be made public. Sarah Mitchell filed her story just before the printing deadline, carefully avoiding any claims she couldn't substantiate while still capturing the gravity of the situation. Tomorrow would bring new developments, she was certain of that. The question was whether those developments would vindicate the anonymous claims or expose them as nothing more than malicious rumors designed to harm the royal family during a vulnerable time. The second day brought unexpected complications that no one had anticipated. At precisely 8 in the morning, a second anonymous account posted what appeared to be a transcript of the alleged audio. The document, shared as a screenshot, contained dialogue attributed to Queen Consort Camilla discussing Catherine's condition with an unnamed companion. The conversation supposedly took place during a private tea at Clarence House 3 weeks earlier. Detective Inspector Harrison arrived at his office to find the new evidence waiting in his inbox, forwarded by the Royal Protection Unit. He studied the transcript carefully, looking for details that might help identify its source. The conversation included references to specific medical procedures and treatment timelines that only someone with intimate knowledge of Catherine's situation would know. This narrowed down the pool of potential suspects considerably. At the hospital where Princess Catherine received treatment, Dr. Margaret Whitmore was called into an emergency meeting with hospital administrators. The transcript contained medical information that could only have come from someone with access to patient records or someone Catherine had confided in. Personally, Dr. Whitmore had been Catherine's primary physician for years and felt personally responsible for ensuring her patient's privacy. She volunteered to be interviewed first, opening her own schedule and communications to scrutiny. Sarah Mitchell read through the transcript multiple times, her journalistic instincts telling her something was off. Certain phrases seemed too perfect, too quotable, as if someone had crafted them specifically for maximum impact. Real conversations rarely flowed so smoothly or contained such damning statements without context. She began to suspect that, even if some kernel of truth existed in the claims, the transcript had been heavily edited or perhaps entirely fabricated. Meanwhile, Prince William was dealing with his own frustrations. As Catherine's husband, he felt helpless watching her privacy being violated in such a public way. He spent the morning on the phone with security experts, demanding answers about how such a breach could have occurred. William had always been protective of his family's privacy, having grown up watching his mother, Princess Diana, being hounded by the media. He was determined not to let history repeat itself. The palace finally broke its silence. Late in the morning, with a strongly worded statement, the official communication described the alleged audio and transcript as potentially fabricated and part of a malicious campaign against the royal family. The statement emphasized that legal action was being pursued against anyone involved in creating or distributing the materials. Furthermore, the palace announced that a full security review was underway to identify any possible breaches. Elizabeth Thornton spent hours coordinating the response across multiple teams. The legal team needed to prepare potential lawsuits against media outlets that published the transcript without verification. The communications team worked on messaging that would reassure the public. Without revealing too much about Catherine's actual health status, the security team began the painstaking process of reviewing surveillance footage and access logs from both Kensington Palace and Clarence House. In a quiet corner of a London cafe, a young man named Thomas Bradley watched the news coverage on his laptop with growing anxiety. Thomas had worked as a junior footman at Clarence House until his dismissal 3 months earlier. For what palace officials termed inappropriate behavior, he knew things about the inner workings of the royal, a household that most people never would. He also knew that he had become a person of interest in the investigation. Even though he had nothing to do with the leak, Detective Harrison's team began conducting interviews with current and former palace staff. The process was methodical and time-consuming. Each person had to account for their movements and access during the relevant time periods. Most were cooperative, understanding that helping the investigation was in everyone's best interest. However, a few seemed nervous or evasive, which naturally drew additional scrutiny from the experienced detective. By afternoon, several major news organizations had made the decision not to publish the transcript, citing concerns about its authenticity and the ethical implications of invading the royal family's privacy. However, smaller blogs and social media accounts continued to spread the material widely. The internet had made controlling information nearly impossible, and once something was online, removing it completely was like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube. Catherine's parents, Carol and Michael Middleton, arrived at Kensington Palace to provide support to their daughter. They had weathered many storms since Catherine married into the royal family, but this situation felt particularly cruel. Their daughter was dealing with serious health concerns, and instead of being allowed to recover in peace, she was at the center of a media circus fueled by unverified claims and possible fabrications. Queen Camilla issued her own personal statement through her office, categorically denying that she had ever discussed Catherine's health in the manner described in the transcript. She expressed support for Catherine and emphasized the strong relationship between them. The statement was carefully crafted to be supportive without revealing too much or appearing defensive. Camilla understood that in situations like this, sometimes less was more. Sarah Mitchell received a tip from an unexpected source late in the afternoon. A former tabloid journalist who had left the industry years ago contacted her with information about a similar hoax that had targeted celebrities in the past. The method matched what they were seeing now. Anonymous claims, carefully timed releases of information, and transcripts that seemed almost too perfect. Sarah began investigating whether this might be part of a larger pattern of attacks on high-profile individuals. At Scotland Yard, Detective Harrison made a breakthrough when his team discovered that the IP address used to post the original claim had been routed through multiple proxy servers, making it nearly impossible to trace directly. However, one of the technical analysts noticed a pattern in the timing of the posts that suggested the person behind them was likely in the United Kingdom and working during standard business hours. This detail might seem small, but it helped narrow down the investigation significantly. Prince William and Princess Catherine released a joint photograph that evening, showing them together and smiling at their home. The image was clearly recent and was intended to show the public that they were united and strong despite the ongoing scandal. No statement accompanied the photograph, but none was needed. The message was clear: they would not be intimidated or broken by malicious rumors. As the day ended, public opinion began shifting. Many people who had initially believed the claims started questioning whether they had been too quick to judge. The lack of actual audio, combined with the palace's strong denial and the questionable nature of the transcript, made some wonder if they had been manipulated. Social media discussions became more skeptical, with users pointing out inconsistencies in the alleged transcript and questioning the motivations of whoever was behind the posts. Thomas Bradley decided to reach out to Detective Harrison directly, even though he had been dismissed from his position at Clarence House. wanted to help clear his name and prove he had nothing to do with the leak. He contacted Scotland Yard and volunteered to provide a complete accounting of his time since leaving palace employment. His willingness to cooperate would either exonerate him or provide investigators with valuable leads. In her office at the hospital, Dr. Whitmore completed her interview with internal investigators. She had provided access to all relevant communications and had walked them through the security protocols in place to protect patient information. The investigators found no evidence of any breach from the medical side, which suggested the source of the leak, if it existed at all, was somewhere within the palace system rather than the healthcare system. Sarah Mitchell worked late into the night, following the new lead about similar hoaxes targeting celebrities. She discovered 3 cases over the past 2 years where anonymous accounts had posted fake audio transcripts about famous individuals, causing brief scandals before being exposed as fabrications. The methods were remarkably similar to what was happening now with the royal family. She began to suspect they might be dealing with someone who had done this before and had refined their technique. The third day of the crisis brought a development that changed everything. A technology expert who specialized in audio forensics came forward with an analysis that would prove crucial to the investigation. Dr. Robert Chen, a professor at Imperial College London, had been following the story with professional interest. He offered his services to Scotland Yard free of charge. Motivated by a desire to see truth prevail over misinformation, Detective Harrison welcomed the assistance. Though he remained cautious about getting his hopes up, Dr. Chen explained that even without the actual audio files, certain characteristics of the transcript could reveal whether it was likely genuine or fabricated. He pointed out several linguistic patterns that suggested the dialogue had been written by someone trying to imitate how they thought aristocrats spoke, rather than capturing genuine conversation. Real speech patterns included more interruptions, incomplete sentences, and casual language than the polished transcript contained. Meanwhile, the anonymous account that had started everything suddenly went dark. All previous posts were deleted, and the account itself disappeared from the social media platform. This move raised more questions than it answered. Was the person behind it getting cold feet? Had they been identified and forced to remove the content? Or was this simply the next phase of whatever game they were playing? At Clarence House, Security Director Malcolm Foster was conducting his own parallel investigation. Malcolm had served in military intelligence before joining the royal household, and he brought that experience to bear on the current situation. He had his team create a timeline of everyone who had been present in areas where private conversations between Camilla and others might have taken place. The list was longer than he would have liked, including staff members, visitors, and even contractors who had been doing renovation work. Sarah Mitchell published a new article that morning, raising serious questions about the authenticity of the transcript. Her piece outlined the inconsistencies she had identified and presented, evidence of similar hoaxes that had targeted other public figures. The article was carefully balanced, neither completely dismissing the possibility of a real leak nor accepting the claims at face value. Her editor praised the work as exactly the kind of responsible journalism the situation demanded. Princess Catherine made her first semi-public appearance since the scandal broke. She was photographed leaving a private art gallery in London, where she had been viewing an exhibition with a small group of friends. Catherine looked healthy and composed, deliberately contradicting the narrative suggested by the leaked transcript that portrayed her as seriously ill and struggling with her duties. The photographs were shared widely. Many saw them as Catherine's way of taking control of her own story. Thomas Bradley's voluntary interview with Detective Harrison lasted several hours. The former footman provided detailed information about his time at Clarence House, including the reasons for his dismissal, which he claimed were based on a misunderstanding about protocol violations. More importantly, he offered insights into how information flowed within the palace and who might have both access to private conversations and motivation to leak them. His cooperation was noted. Though Harrison remained professionally skeptical until everything could be verified, Dr. Chen completed his preliminary analysis and presented his findings to the investigation team. His conclusion was that the transcript showed multiple signs of fabrication. The sentence structures were too uniform, the vocabulary choices too consistent, the overall flow too neat to represent genuine recorded conversation. He estimated with high confidence that someone had written the dialogue rather than transcribed it from actual audio. This didn't prove that no recordings existed, but it strongly suggested the transcript being circulated was fake. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source when a digital forensics expert working with Scotland Yard traced a connection between the deleted anonymous account and a small online forum dedicated to conspiracy theories about the royal family. The forum had been relatively obscure until recently, when activity had suddenly increased. Several users had been posting increasingly extreme theories about health problems within the royal family, and one user's writing style bore striking similarities to the language used in the fake transcript. Elizabeth Thornton coordinated a meeting between palace legal advisors and representatives from the social media platforms where the false information had spread most widely. The platforms were cooperative, agreeing to remove content that violated their policies against harassment and misinformation. However, the challenge remained that once information spread across the internet, removing it completely was virtually impossible. The focus shifted to discrediting the false claims rather than simply trying to erase them. William and Catherine decided to break with protocol and grant a brief interview to a trusted journalist. During the carefully controlled conversation, Catherine spoke generally about dealing with health challenges while maintaining her royal duties. Without providing specific medical details, she emphasized that any suggestions she was unable to fulfill her role were completely false. William expressed frustration with the invasion of their privacy and made it clear they would pursue legal action against those responsible for the fabricated transcript. Queen Consort Camilla, meanwhile, was dealing with her own concerns about how the scandal might affect her public image. Despite the growing evidence that the transcript was fake, she knew that some people would always wonder if there was truth behind the claims. Her communications team advised her to continue with scheduled public engagements, presenting a confident and untroubled demeanor that would contrast with any narrative of palace drama or family conflict by midday. Several media outlets that had initially given credence to the leaked transcript began publishing retractions or updated stories acknowledging the mounting evidence of fabrication. Sarah Mitchell's article had influenced other journalists to take a more critical look at the claims. The tide of public opinion was shifting, with many people expressing anger at being manipulated by what now appeared to be a deliberate hoax designed to damage the royal family. Malcolm Foster's investigation identified 3 individuals who had been dismissed from palace employment within the past year and might harbor resentment. All 3 were interviewed, and while 2 were quickly cleared, the third person, a former communications assistant named Rachel Morrison, showed concerning behavior during her interview. Rachel had been let go after violating confidentiality agreements by discussing palace matters with friends. She denied any involvement in the current situation but appeared nervous and evasive when questioned. Detective Harrison decided to focus additional resources on Rachel Morrison. A warrant was obtained to examine her electronic devices and communications. The search revealed that Rachel had been active on the conspiracy theory forum, though not under her own name. She had posted extensively about the royal family, expressing bitterness about her dismissal, and making several comments suggesting she had inside knowledge of palace secrets. Dr. Whitmore received the welcome news that the hospital's internal investigation had concluded. With no evidence of any breach of patient confidentiality from the medical side, Catherine's medical records had been accessed only by authorized personnel with legitimate reasons, and all access was properly logged and accounted for. This finding provided some relief, confirming that the healthcare system had maintained its integrity, even as other aspects of the situation remained murky. As evening approached, the palace prepared to release a more detailed statement addressing the situation. The communication would acknowledge the distress caused by the false claims, thank the public for their support, and announce that significant progress had been made in identifying those responsible for creating and spreading the fabricated transcript. The statement would also emphasize the royal family's commitment to privacy and dignity while serving the public. Sarah Mitchell was working on a follow-up article that would reveal more details about the investigation when she received an anonymous email. The message claimed to be from someone with direct knowledge of how the hoax was created and suggested meeting in person to provide information. Sarah was intrigued but cautious. She forwarded the email to Detective Harrison before responding, knowing that this could be either a major break in the case or another layer of deception. It's designed to further confuse the situation. The mysterious email to Sarah Mitchell set off a chain of events that would expose the full extent of the conspiracy. Detective Harrison coordinated with Sarah to arrange a controlled meeting with the anonymous source. The meeting location was chosen carefully. Public cafe with good visibility where plainclothes officers could observe without being detected. Sarah arrived early, her recorder hidden but ready, her nerves on edge as she waited to see who would walk through the door. The person who appeared was not who anyone expected. A young woman in her 20s, dressed casually in jeans and a jacket, approached Sarah's table nervously. She introduced herself as Emma Peterson, a freelance social media consultant who had been hired anonymously to help spread the initial posts about the supposed leaked audio. Emma explained that she had believed she was working on a legitimate marketing campaign until she realized the damage being caused and decided she needed to come forward. Emma's story revealed a sophisticated operation that went far beyond a single disgruntled former employee. She had been contacted through an encrypted messaging app by someone using the pseudonym Windsor Truth. This person had paid her in cryptocurrency to create multiple fake social media accounts and use them to amplify the original anonymous post. Emma had been given specific instructions about timing, which platforms to target, and even suggested hashtags to use for maximum visibility. Detective Harrison joined the conversation after Emma had finished her initial explanation to Sarah. He was impressed by her willingness to cooperate, but needed to verify her claims. Emma provided screenshots of her conversations with Windsor Truth, transaction records showing the cryptocurrency payments, and detailed information about the social media accounts she had created. The evidence she offered would prove invaluable in tracing the operation. Back to its source, the investigation took on new urgency with Emma's revelations. If someone had the resources to hire social media consultants and pay them in cryptocurrency, this was more than just a vindictive former employee acting alone. Detective Harrison assembled a larger team, bringing in specialists in cybercrime and financial investigation. The case had evolved from a potential privacy breach into something resembling an organized campaign of disinformation against the royal family. Meanwhile, Rachel Morrison was brought in for a second, more intensive interview. Confronted with evidence of her activity on the conspiracy theory forum and her bitter posts about the palace, she finally broke down and admitted partial involvement. Rachel confessed to writing the fake transcript, drawing on her knowledge of how palace conversations typically flowed and incorporating medical rumors she had heard from other former staff members. However, she insisted that someone else had approached her with the idea and had paid her to create the document. Rachel's admission confirmed what many had suspected, but it also opened new questions. Who had approached her? How had they known she might be willing to participate? And what was their ultimate goal in orchestrating this elaborate hoax? Rachel claimed she had never met her contact in person and had been paid through anonymous money transfers. She provided Detective Harrison with the account information, which would be traced, though everyone suspected it would lead through several dead ends. Before revealing anything useful, Princess Catherine's medical team issued their own statement that afternoon. With her permission, Dr. Whitmore, speaking on behalf of the treatment group, confirmed that Catherine was receiving ongoing care for a medical condition, but emphasized that suggestions she was incapacitated or unable to perform her duties were completely false. The statement was carefully worded to provide reassurance, without violating patient privacy or revealing specific medical details that Catherine wished to keep private. The cryptocurrency trail that Emma Peterson had provided lead Detective Harrison's financial investigation team through a complex series of transactions across multiple countries. The person behind the payments had been careful, but not careful enough. Each transaction left a digital footprint, and by following these breadcrumbs, investigators began to narrow down the possible sources. The money had originated from an account in Eastern Europe, passed through several intermediary wallets, and ended up in the hands of Emma and presumably Rachel as well. Sarah Mitchell worked with her editor to prepare a comprehensive article exposing the conspiracy. The story would reveal Emma Peterson's cooperation, Rachel Morrison's admission of fabricating the transcript, and the evidence of a coordinated campaign using paid operatives to spread disinformation. The article would be published the following morning, and Sarah knew it would dominate headlines and fundamentally change the narrative around the entire scandal at Kensington Palace. William and Catherine were briefed on the investigation's progress. They felt vindicated that the truth was emerging. But both were disturbed by the revelation that someone had orchestrated such an elaborate attack on their privacy and reputation. William spoke with his security team about enhanced protective measures, not just for physical safety, but for digital and information security as well. The modern royal family faced threats that previous generations had never imagined. Malcolm Foster's internal palace investigation also reached important conclusions. His team identified several security vulnerabilities that had made it easier for former staff members like Rachel Morrison to retain knowledge and access that should have been revoked upon their departure. Malcolm prepared a comprehensive report with recommendations for improving protocols around information security, staff departures, and background checks for anyone with access to sensitive areas or information. Queen Consort Camilla met privately with Princess Catherine to discuss the situation. The two women had developed a stronger relationship over the years, and both felt that the scandal had been designed to drive a wedge between them. They agreed to make a joint public appearance soon, demonstrating their unity in refusing to allow malicious actors to damage their relationship. The planning for this appearance began immediately, their teams coordinating on timing and messaging. Dr. Chen continued his analysis, now working with actual communications data provided by Emma Peterson. He was able to identify patterns in how Windsor Truth communicated that suggested they might have experience in intelligence work or professional propaganda operations. The level of sophistication in operational security, combined with apparent mistakes that had allowed tracing, suggested someone with training but perhaps not current practice in such activities as evening fell. Detective Harrison received confirmation from Interpol that they were assisting with the international aspects of the investigation. The cryptocurrency trail had been traced to several countries, and cooperation from foreign law enforcement would be crucial in identifying the ultimate source. The case had grown well beyond a simple privacy violation into an international investigation with implications for information, security, and the vulnerability of public figures to coordinated disinformation campaigns. Thomas Bradley, who had been cleared early in the investigation, reached out to palace officials offering to share his insights about potential security improvements. His perspective as a former insider who had nothing to do with the scandal made him a valuable resource. Malcolm Foster agreed to meet with him, recognizing that sometimes those who had left the institution could see vulnerabilities that current employees might miss. The palace legal team prepared multiple lawsuits to be filed the following week. Rachel Morrison would face charges related to fraud and harassment. Legal action would also be pursued against the platforms that had been slow to remove the false content, though these cases were more complex and might take years to resolve. The royal family was determined to send a clear message that such attacks would be met with serious consequences. Sarah Mitchell received another message from Emma Peterson late that evening. Emma had remembered additional details about her conversations with Windsor Truth that might be helpful. She mentioned that the person had made reference to correcting the narrative about the royal family, and it seemed particularly focused on undermining public confidence in the newer members of the royal family, specifically Catherine and Meghan. This suggested a motivation beyond simple troublemaking or profit. As midnight approached, everyone involved in the investigation and response felt they were finally getting ahead of the situation. The truth was emerging. The perpetrators were being identified. Public opinion had shifted back in favor of the royal family. However, Detective Harrison couldn't shake the feeling that they still hadn't uncovered the full picture. Someone with resources and motivation had orchestrated this attack, and until that person was identified and their ultimate goals understood, the threat remained real and potentially ongoing. The fifth day began with Sarah Mitchell's explosive article hitting newsstands and websites across the country. The headline read, "Royal Audio Hoax Exposed. Organized Campaign Targeted Princess Catherine." The comprehensive piece detailed Emma Peterson's cooperation, Rachel Morrison's confession, and the evidence of a coordinated disinformation operation. Within hours, the story was being covered by international media, and the conversation shifted from speculation about royal family drama to outrage over the manipulation of public opinion. Detective Harrison arrived at Scotland Yard to find his team, energized by the new leads Emma had provided. The reference to correcting the narrative suggested ideological motivation rather than simple malice or profit. His team began investigating connections between Windsor Truth and various anti-monarchy groups, public and organizations, and other entities that might have reasons to undermine the royal family. The search required careful work, as many of these groups operated within their legal rights and couldn't be investigated without cause. At Interpol headquarters in Lyon, France, specialist investigators were tracing the cryptocurrency transactions through their international network. The money trail led through accounts in Poland, then Cyprus, and finally to a digital wallet that had been accessed from multiple locations in the United Kingdom. This suggested that while the operation had been designed to appear foreign in origin, the person behind it was likely based in Britain and had created the international routing to throw investigators off their trail. Princess Catherine decided to take a more active role in addressing the situation publicly. Her communications team arranged for her to write a personal statement that would be published on the official royal family website and social media accounts. In the statement, Catherine thanked the public for their support during a difficult time, acknowledged that she had been dealing with health challenges but was managing them successfully, and expressed disappointment that anyone would fabricate such cruel lies about her family. The statement continued with Catherine addressing the broader issue of disinformation in the digital age. She spoke about the responsibility that everyone shares in verifying information before sharing it, and the real harm that can be caused when false narratives spread unchecked. The statement was powerful and personal, showing a side of Catherine that the public rarely saw. It humanized her beyond her royal role and created genuine sympathy for what she and her family had endured. Malcolm Foster's security review was completed and presented to King Charles and senior palace officials. The document outlined 15 specific recommendations for improving information security, ranging from enhanced background checks for staff to new protocols for handling sensitive conversations. Some recommendations were immediately approved and began implementation. Others required more discussion and careful consideration of how they might affect the working environment and culture within the royal household. Rachel Morrison was formally charged with multiple offenses, including harassment, fraud, and violations of her confidentiality agreement with the palace. She appeared in court briefly for an initial hearing, where bail was set with strict conditions, including surrendering her passport and having no contact with royal family members or palace staff. Her legal representative indicated she would plead guilty and cooperate fully with ongoing investigations in hopes of receiving a reduced sentence. Emma Peterson entered a cooperation agreement with prosecutors that would shield her from serious charges in exchange for her continued assistance with the investigation. She met with Detective Harrison's team again, this time bringing her laptop and phone, so that forensic experts could extract every possible bit of data about her communications with Windsor Truth. The technical team discovered that the encrypted messaging app had kept more metadata than Emma realized, including timestamps and approximate locations from which Windsor Truth had been sending messages. The metadata revealed that Windsor Truth had been active primarily during business hours and had sent messages from locations in central London and occasionally from Oxford. This geographical pattern, combined with the sophisticated operational approach and the ideological motivation, led Detective Harrison to develop a new theory. He began investigating individuals with connections to academic or think tank circles who might have the skills and motivation to orchestrate such a campaign.
Queen, consort Camilla, and princess
Catherine appeared together at a children's charity event, their first public joint engagement since the scandal broke. The photographs of them chatting warmly, laughing together, working side by side with young people sent a clear message that the supposed conflict between them had been fabricated. Media coverage of the event was overwhelmingly positive, with commentators praising both women for rising above the controversy with grace and dignity. At the hospital, Dr. Whitmore reflected on how the scandal had affected her team and their patient. The experience had been stressful for everyone involved, but it had also reinforced the importance of the security protocols already in place. She wrote a memo to hospital administration recommending additional training for all staff on handling information about high-profile patients and dealing with potential security breaches. The recommendations would be implemented across all departments within the month. A major breakthrough came when the technical analysis team identified a pattern in the writing style of Windsor. Truth messages that matched published articles by Dr. Marcus Pemberton, a lecturer in politics at Oxford University and a known Republican activist. Pemberton had written extensively about modernizing or abolishing the monarchy, though always within legal bounds. However, his writing showed distinctive patterns in sentence construction and vocabulary, choices that aligned remarkably closely with the communications Emma Peterson had received. Detective Harrison obtained a warrant to search Dr. Pemberton's office and home. The search was conducted discreetly, with full cooperation from Oxford University administration, who were horrified at the possibility that one of their faculty members might be involved in such activities. The search uncovered encrypted drives, burner phones, and notes that appeared to outline the operation against the royal family. Dr. Pemberton was arrested and brought in for questioning, under interrogation. Dr. Pemberton initially denied everything, claiming his Republican activism was entirely legitimate political activity protected by free speech rights. However, when confronted with the evidence linking him to Windsor Truth and the payments to Emma Peterson and Rachel Morrison, his story began to crumble. He admitted to orchestrating the hoax, but claimed his motivation was purely political, attempting to expose what he saw as the anachronistic nature of the monarchy by demonstrating how easily public opinion could be manipulated. Sarah Mitchell broke the news of Dr. Pemberton's arrest late in the afternoon. Her article detailed his background as a Republican activist, his academic work criticizing the monarchy, and the evidence linking him to the disinformation campaign. The story generated intense debate about the boundaries between legitimate political activism and criminal behavior. Some of Pemberton's supporters argued he was being persecuted for his political views, while others condemned him for the cruel and illegal methods he had employed. William and Catherine were informed of the arrest and felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that the person responsible had been identified and would face justice, but sadness that someone would go to such lengths to hurt them and their family. William expressed hope that Pemberton's prosecution would serve as a deterrent to others who might consider similar actions, while Catherine focused on how they could move forward and put the entire episode behind them. The palace issued a statement acknowledging Dr. Pemberton's arrest and thanking law enforcement for their thorough investigation. The statement emphasized that while the royal family respected legitimate political debate about the monarchy's role, the creation and spread of false and damaging information crossed a clear line into criminal activity. The statement also announced that civil lawsuits against Pemberton and his co-conspirators would proceed regardless of the criminal case outcomes as the day ended. Detective Harrison reviewed the case file with satisfaction. The investigation had been complex and challenging, involving multiple jurisdictions, sophisticated digital forensics, and careful coordination with various agencies. The successful resolution demonstrated that even in an age where disinformation could spread globally within hours, dedicated investigative work could still uncover the truth and hold perpetrators accountable. However, he knew the case wasn't quite over. Pemberton's full trial lay ahead, and there might be other aspects of the conspiracy yet to be uncovered. Dr. Chen completed his final report on the linguistic and technical analysis of the fabricated transcript and communications. His work had been crucial in establishing that the transcript was fake and in identifying patterns that helped lead to Pemberton's arrest. The report would be submitted as evidence in the criminal case and would also be published in an academic journal as a case study in detecting fabricated communications. Dr. Chen hoped his work might help others identify similar disinformation campaigns in the future. Emma Peterson gave an interview. 3 months after Dr. Pemberton's arrest, the case finally went to trial at the Central Criminal Court in London. The courtroom was packed with journalists, legal observers, and members of the public who had followed the scandal from its beginning. Sarah Mitchell sat in the press gallery, her notepad ready to capture every detail of what promised to be one of the most closely watched trials involving the royal family. In recent years, the prosecution's case was methodical and overwhelming. They presented the evidence gathered by Detective Harrison's team, including the encrypted communications, financial records, tracing cryptocurrency payments, and the sophisticated forensic analysis conducted by Dr. Chen. Emma Peterson took the stand as a key witness, describing how Pemberton had recruited her and the instructions he had given for spreading the disinformation. Her testimony was compelling. She expressed genuine remorse for her role in the conspiracy. Rachel Morrison also testified, explaining how Pemberton had approached her, knowing her resentment toward the palace and her intimate knowledge of how conversations might realistically unfold within royal circles. She described writing the fake transcript to Pemberton's specifications, incorporating medical rumors and creating dialogue that would seem plausible to the public. Her voice broke several times during testimony as she acknowledged the pain her actions had caused to Princess Catherine and the entire royal family. Dr. Pemberton's defense team attempted to frame his actions as political protests rather than criminal activity. They argued that he was exercising his right to free speech and engaging in activism against an institution he genuinely believed was harmful to British democracy. However, the prosecution successfully demonstrated that there was a clear difference between legitimate political criticism and orchestrating a campaign of lies designed to damage individuals' reputations and invade their privacy. Princess Catherine was not required to testify in person, but her written statement was read to the court. In it, she described the emotional toll of having her health struggles turned into public spectacle based on fabricated information. She spoke about the additional stress placed on her family during an already difficult time and the violation she felt knowing that people were spreading intimate false details about her medical condition. The statement was powerful and clearly affected everyone in the courtroom. The trial lasted 2 weeks, with the defense calling various witnesses to speak about Dr. Pemberton's character and his history of peaceful political activism. Several colleagues from Oxford University testified that they had never known him to engage in anything illegal and were shocked by the allegations. However, none of this testimony could overcome the mountain of evidence demonstrating his central role in orchestrating the disinformation campaign. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges, including harassment, fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and violations of the Computer Misuse Act related to his unauthorized use of encrypted communications to coordinate criminal activity. Dr. Pemberton showed no emotion as the verdicts were read. Though his legal team immediately indicated they would appeal, the judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later, requesting additional reports on Pemberton's background and the impact of his crimes. Sarah Mitchell's coverage of the trial earned her a nomination for Journalist of the Year. Her reporting throughout the scandal had been exemplary, maintaining high ethical standards while still breaking important stories and asking difficult questions. She had become the go-to voice for fair and accurate coverage of royal news, and her work had helped restore some public faith in responsible journalism during an era of rampant misinformation. At the sentencing hearing, the judge delivered a stern condemnation of Pemberton's actions, while acknowledging his right to hold Republican views and engage in legitimate political activism. The judge emphasized that fabricating damaging lies about real people, coordinating a conspiracy to spread those lies, and profiting from the resulting chaos were serious crimes that warranted significant punishment. Dr. Pemberton was sentenced to 3 years in prison in order to pay substantial damages to the royal family in the civil lawsuits that had been filed. the palace released a measured statement. Following the sentencing, expressing satisfaction that justice had been served while emphasizing their desire to move forward, the statement thanked law enforcement, the Crown Prosecution Service, and all those who had worked to expose the truth. It also included a gracious note acknowledging that most critics of the monarchy engaged in respectful debate rather than criminal deception, and that the royal family valued open discussion about their role in modern Britain. Princess Catherine marked the end of the saga by returning to her full schedule of royal duties. Attending numerous public engagements over the following weeks, she looked healthy and energized, deliberately demonstrating that the false narratives about her incapacity had been just that, false narratives. Her appearances were covered extensively by the media, with most coverage focusing on her work rather than the scandal that had now concluded. Malcolm Foster's security improvements were fully implemented across all royal households. The new protocols included enhanced vetting for staff members, regular security audits of information handling practices, and updated technology to protect private communications. While some within the palace found the new measures initially burdensome, most came to appreciate that they were necessary in an age where a single breach could have far-reaching consequences. Dr. Whitmore continued treating Princess Catherine, and their relationship was strengthened by how they had navigated the crisis together. The hospital implemented the new training programs on handling high-profile patients, and these protocols became a model that other medical facilities requested permission to adopt. The healthcare industry recognized that protecting patient privacy required constant vigilance and regular updating of security practices. Queen, Consort Camilla, and Princess Catherine's relationship emerged stronger from the ordeal. They had proven to themselves and to the public that manufactured conflict couldn't drive them apart. They began working together more frequently on joint charitable projects, particularly those focused on health awareness and supporting families dealing with medical challenges. Their collaboration became one of the positive outcomes of an otherwise difficult situation. Detective Inspector James Harrison received a commendation for his work on the case. The investigation had required coordination across multiple agencies, sophisticated technical analysis, and persistent detective work to identify and build a case against Pemberton. The successful prosecution demonstrated that even in the digital age, with all its challenges for law enforcement, determined investigators could still track down those who used technology for malicious purposes. Emma Peterson used her experience to become an advocate for digital literacy and critical thinking about online information. She gave talks at schools and community centers about how she had been manipulated and what signs people should watch for when evaluating information they encounter online. Her willingness to share her story and take responsibility for her mistakes helped many young people understand the real consequences of spreading unverified information. Thomas Bradley was offered a new position within the royal household, working specifically on security awareness training for staff. His unique perspective as someone who had been under suspicion but cleared, combined with his insider knowledge of how the palace operated, made him valuable in helping others understand the importance of maintaining confidentiality and following security protocols. He accepted the position, grateful for the opportunity to rebuild his relationship with the institution. Rachel Morrison served a shorter sentence, and Pemberton, due to her cooperation and genuine remorse. Upon her release, she struggled to rebuild her life. Finding that her involvement in the scandal had made employment difficult, eventually she found work at a small nonprofit organization focused on rehabilitating people with criminal records. The experience of being judged harshly by society gave her empathy for others trying to move past their mistakes. Sarah Mitchell continued her career in journalism. Though she became increasingly focused on the challenge of combating misinformation, she wrote a book about the royal audio hoax case, examining how false information spreads in the digital age and what institutions and individuals can do to protect themselves. The book became a bestseller and was used as a text in journalism schools and media literacy programs. Dr. D. Chen's forensic analysis techniques were adopted by law enforcement agencies worldwide as tools for evaluating the authenticity of alleged leaked communications. His work on the case advanced the field of digital forensics and helped established new standards for determining whether transcripts and recordings were genuine or fabricated. He received numerous speaking invitations and continued consulting on high-profile cases. Involving potential disinformation a year after the trial's conclusion, Prince William gave a rare interview reflecting on the experience. He spoke about the importance of privacy for his family, the challenges of raising children in the public eye, and the responsibility that everyone shares in creating a media environment based on truth rather than sensationalism.